Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance and Analytics World Knowledge Post covering finance and property news. It's Monday again and Edwin is back for another rant. And Edwin, we have a doozy of a show today. There is so much to talk about and we're getting smoke and mirrors from the real estate industry.
Well, that's the thing, right? And it's the selling agents, the auctioneers telling buyers what to do. And the unfortunate thing, Martin, is that quite a number of them do exactly what the selling agents tell them to do, and don't refute it because they believe, with all sincerity, that the selling agents are in their corner, and you and I know that they're not in their corner. And as we say over and over again, people have to take a step back, take a deep breath. And before you go in, and anyway, look, we've said a lot of things, but it is quite interesting. But I think none more so than knowing that it all comes out in the wash, and sooner than later you find out all the all the insights or insider information and every other side that the politicians have. Like I keep on saying over and over again, most politicians and most real estate agents are tied up at the hip. And sooner than later you find that out, and how close that is by what Lisa posted on there. It's rather interesting. It's not the first, not the last, and this shit will just keep on going and going and going.
Yeah, it is concerning, isn't it? When you say, well, there's stuff going on which we don't really know about until it comes out in the wash. But it's funny, isn't it, how certain politicians and other hangers-on seem to make money left, right and centre, whatever they do. And as you say, real estate, politicians, two sides of the same coin, two cheeks of the same bum.
Yeah. Look, it's rather amazing. I've actually reaching out to a couple of the people that have put that up on X. Lisa and being one of them, and Mike. I'm trying to get some more information on it because I don't have a particular website that access to some portals down there in Victoria. I might actually reach out to Catherine Cashmore. She may be able to fill me in as to. I'd like to know who the agent or the agency was that was representing the landowners in this transaction, because you can be assured your bottom dollar that if there was a real estate office or an agent that was so-called representing the vendors, the hobby farmers there that only got the 11 million, that he or she, they knew what was around the corner, and they didn't disclose it. Look, I'm putting my money on that. I'm going to put my 2 bob on that comment, that statement, and the reason is because it happens a lot over and over again in the industry, Martin. Not only have I seen over the 3 decades ex-politicians that have been in charge of state planning regulations, and so forth, and rezoning, become a part of the boards of private building companies and development companies. I mean, I've sat with them, I've spoken with them face to face. We've driven out to look at different sites with them. At the beginning, it's surprising to see them, but then you sort of get used to it because it's a commonality. And the other common theme when it comes to landowners trying to put together land envelopes in order to present to developers as potential development sites, or to amalgamate the sites. Look, when in most cases, when landowners are trying to act on their own, you can be assured that they're going to be shortchanged, right? But then for them, the other side of the coin is the unscrupulous industry characters that shortchange them. I know a deal in the North Shore where a real estate agent owns one of the homes, and he was trying to put the other 3 homes together. It's actually a small complex of villas, and he owns one of the 4, and he was trying to put a deal together but at the end of the day, the fortunate thing was that two of the parties came to us for advice, and I gave them my summary of what they should be asking for and what the land was, the land value was for, as a development, as a raw site. Obviously, the developer was going to put in a fair bit of money in order to convert it into a development site with a DA. So you've got to take all that into consideration. But look, they were going to be shortchanged anywhere between 17 and 22%. And one of the owners of those villas was a real estate agent that was putting this bloody deal together and was supposed to be acting in the best interest of his neighbours, which was all BS. At the end of the day, they pulled the pin. And the developer can put the deal together. But look, this is the industry. This is the unfortunate thing about the industry, and this is the unfortunate thing about the politics as well, where we see over and over again that it is two industries that are very corrupt by nature, or the amount of money that rolls through. Has unfortunately made a lot of corruption embed itself, root itself in these two sides, and this is where we are. So this, at the end of the day, what I try to do on all the social media platforms, and obviously on DFA, Walk the World, Monday Evening Property Rants with yourself, and other podcasts that we do. Try to bring light into what is a very, very murky industry. And you got to really be watchful of what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people make a lot of money through that. A lot of politicians and ex-politicians seem to have done very well out of it, but ordinary people, of course, are on the other end of the seesaw, as it were, and so they're often the ones paying up and losing money, or taxpayers directly losing money. So there are always winners and losers. It's just funny how politicians and the real estate guys seem to be always the winners and everybody else the losers. That always has been us, I guess. Let's just talk about the broader issues here, Edwin, because, of course, there's a lot of interesting discussion going on around at the moment. So, for example, Warren Hogan came out with this really interesting observation. He's talking about the RBA and the fact that everyone's talking about the Cup, Melbourne Cup, and the RBA will probably cut. Well, he's just highlighting a couple of really interesting things. Firstly, the labour force reports that came out, unemployment went slightly higher, are all over the place, so they're pretty wobbly. And the other is, and he makes a really important point, Australia is heavily exposed to inflation. Our household sector is among the most indebted in the world, with most of the debt held at floating interest rates. This leaves little room for error in managing inflation. If it's the RBA's Monetary Policy Board that is responsible for managing inflation risks, to let inflation become embedded within our economy will expose our community substantial unacceptable financial risk. So he's calling out pretty simply that it's not as simple as cut, right? Which I think is really important. Oh, and by the way, just latest data shows that, in fact, it's New South Wales now that's a bit of a drag on the economy. That's according to the Oxford Economics report that just came out. Higher unemployment, the tariff wars, and a slowdown in wages growth will drag on Australia's economy and reduce shoppers' appetite for spending, according to a bleak prediction from a major global economic forecaster. So, that's interesting. And then, of course, another interesting bit of news was on the block. Well, there were a couple of winners, but two homes failed to sell. So, maybe all is not well in the world of real estate. And yet, of course, everyone is now trumpeting, hey, auction results, clearances, boom, boom, boom. Well, no, look at the numbers. It's not quite like that. And we've had this spate of articles, investors flood the property market, investors' activity likely to continue over the rest of this year and into next. Or this one, they've just poured fuel to fire markets up even more. Sydney's real estate market is about to be supercharged again as brokers report a surge in hopeful buyers. And then you've got these sort of 19 million deal in 72 hours, blah, blah, blah. The home market's warm. Do I hear hot? First home buyers plus rate cuts and spring selling have auctions confident. And then you get some really helpful advice like this: tips for buyers. Stay calm and keep perspective. Well, that's always good advice. A lot of emotion out there, but this is the one I thought was a doozy. Don't try to start an auction at a low figure. Be strong and bold. Ask yourself, what do I need to pay to buy? And if a home does not look like it will sell at auction and you're quite keen on it, try to be the highest bidder so you'll be first in line when it comes to negotiating afterwards. Well, well, well. Edwin, what do you make of all that? That's a little bit of one-sided advice, methinks.
Well, look, Matt, it's one of those things, right? You got to take everything with a grain of salt that the mainstream put out, and every transaction differs from one from the next. One thing for sure is that there are a lot of sales happening out there, especially in the mid-range property market where people are being played. We bought this out a couple of weeks ago, where I said you just got to be careful not to be played. You've got to be able. You've got to take a breath and sit back and look at all the indicators as to that are telling you. If it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, you're being played. So every transaction has to be looked at in its own merits. The property has to be looked at in its own merits and what it is. And also, you as are you an investor? Are you a property flipper? Are you a first-time buyer? Are you all these things have to be taken into consideration. So when you start looking at all these reference points, we begin to look at property totally different. As I say to the majority of our clients, I say to them, my role, one of my main roles, and the roles of the rest of the team, is to take away as much of the emotion from the transaction as possible. But I would be a fool to say that we're going to eliminate all the transaction. Even astute investors still walk into transactions with there's that bit of emotion now, but it's that emotion that captivates those tips, right? It's that emotion that the auctioneers, the selling agents are banking on, especially when you start visiting the property 3 times over. You take your tape measure and start measuring to see if your lounge will fit, the bed, what bed you're going to go to, and you start talking in front of the agent what bed you're gonna buy for the kids and this and that, and you start choosing rooms for the kids before you even before the auction starts, a week or so before the auction starts. I mean, they know that that's what they're there for, is to read the signs. But there are other signs also that will tell us when buyers are being played, and this is where you've got to be careful. This is more so a time where you don't really want to be the first one to break this those price ceilings that are in many parts of the city markets, where the market has become hotter and stronger, if I can use that terminology, has been in the lower end markets, in your southwest regions, your west regions, your northwest regions. Why? Because they were predominantly your first-time buyer markets, and this throwing of incentives, as I say, bribes, buy my vote incentives and handouts. Well, of course, this is what you were going to get, and of course, those markets have become very, very hot, even which you and I reported, where we've seen properties just jump up in value by 10-15% within weeks, and all because of these government incentives to promote purchasing. So, and the lack of the homes and the properties that people really want to buy that haven't come on market as many predicted that would. I mean, we were hopeful that in many parts that there would be a surge in numbers, but there hasn't been. So this is really putting a lot of pressure on people that are looking to get in and guess what, folks? The selling agents, they know the story, and they know the story. They know the playbook, and they know it very, very well. So look, this is where you need to. If you can't reach out, if our services are unaffordable, if there are ways that we can help you. There are ways that you yourself, Martin, you can help people calm their emotions down with your one-to-ones. And I've split the services of our office to 3 levels, so that even if it's for just a service on a one transaction where we can help and assist and prevent people from getting over emotion, we will represent them on a one transaction. I mean, a lot of agencies don't do that, but we're happy to do that, just so that people can cannot feel cheated. Because the worst thing is, you're only going to feel remorseful after you overspend and because of emotion, but it's going to hurt you a lot more when then you find out that that the property you bought, whether it's an apartment, a townhouse, a villa, or a freestanding home, has come with a lot of other issues that the building report that the agent gave you, didn't record. So yeah, it's buyer beware.
It is absolutely caveat emptor, and just to say that that little point in the first dot point, being well prepared gives you the best chance to succeed. But I would say not just on a busy weekend. Sometimes the right answer is not to actually go and contest at auction. And I'll also make the point there, and they talk for this on the seller side, capitalize on the day's opportunity, whether it's the highest bidder or post-auction negotiations. I'm skeptical of whether auctions for many properties are the best route, as we touched on before. But I just want to highlight something else, which I think is really important, because you've mentioned the whole issue of emotion. And this article here makes the point that people are so desperate now that they're actually giving up on some of the critical issues that you would normally expect to think about as you go and buy a property. And that's really concerning. This article here, desperate home buyers trying to crack into the Gold Coast market are removing key conditions from their offers as mortgage pre-approvals surge to record highs across the state. So what people are doing now is they're cutting corners, Edwin, because they're so desperate to get in. And it's interesting that I've had a couple of conversations over this last week with people who actually did that. And in fact, they didn't go through the one-to-one conversation. And just to highlight it to everybody, we made a show the other day talking about Ashfield. And we used this as an example to show how the one-to-one conversation actually works. And we went through what Ashfield was going on, what was going on in Ashfield, and what that meant in terms of property prices and things like that. Now, unfortunately, so many people are just being bounced into the market because they're so desperate. They're cutting corners and they're being caught out as a result of it. And we can only say it so many times, Edwin, but slow down, take the emotion out, get the information, make sure that you understand what fair value actually is, because fair value isn't necessarily what the price achieved at auction is. Those two things can be different.
100%, and values are going to start looking at this a lot more critically as well, as we've reached as I said, those new ceilings, those new highs in many suburbs. So they're going to be very, very skeptical when it comes to the prices that people are going to be paying because of emotion. There's only a certain amount of percentage that will add to the value of a property on emotion before they start sort of tapering back on the valuations. Look, let's not make two qualms about it. The values are instructed by banks. They don't sit independent. It's the banks that pay them, and I don't care what people say to me and have said to me over the decades. I've had many conversations with many valuers, and that's the reality. The reality is that they value a property as though you were going to lose that property within 6 months, 6 to 12 months, and it was going to go back on the market, and the bank wants to know whether or not they're going to get the money back. Simple as that, right? So therefore, and valuations aren't necessarily determined by the actual fair value of the property, the square meterage of the land envelope, in the building, the inclusions, fixtures, fittings, any renovation work, any extras, whatever. It's not necessarily. I mean, that's the mythology that they learn at university, and that we learn as being in the industry as well, and being in the building game as well, to understand the value of construction and everything. But look, at the end of the day, the banks look at your serviceability. They look at whether or not you can service the loan. They look at whether or not you're overstretched yourself. They look at whether or not you're the job that one of the applicants has is a high risk job or not, and that determines whether or not you're going to be able to buy the property. It's not necessarily as much as, like you said, Martin, fair value. So all these things have got to be taken into consideration, and this is what we go through with our clients in detail. But going back one step, and that is, folks, we're experiencing on a day-by-day basis that in many auctions, in many transactions, in many campaigns, people are being played, and agents are using that premise. They're using that premise. Oh, there's another party that doesn't want to buy before auction, and would you like to submit an offer because the vendors are considering taking an offer from this other party, and they're forcing people to move ahead with premature offers. And unfortunately, because people get so hung up on a property, emotion drives them. They go along with it, only to find out that, hey, you're facing each other at the auction anyway. All they've done is just establish the price. They've set a new level and prime people up for the auction with emotion. I'll give you one, and I'm sure that our client is not going to get upset in me sharing this, and I know that he watches the show, and I'm going to share this because he's a strong-willed individual, right? And as much as he wanted to buy the property, hey, we sat back and we pulled away from attending the auction the day before. It shattered the selling agent to the point that a week later he's still recovering from that, and his so-called fictitious buyers are nowhere to be seen still. So we're sitting at the moment. We're sitting in a good position. Whether he pursues it or not, is it going to be another story? Because since that day, the auction was mid last week. Since that day, guess what, Martin? Where we were only seeing 2 or 3 listings on the market in that area. Guess how many there are in the market now? 7. And I was talking to other agents today, and they've got another 2 coming up next week. So it could potentially become a smorgasbord, and this is why you just got to sit back, right? But look, it's not as easy as what we make it out to be, or what I say, because obviously I've had decades of experience on the selling side as well as on the buying side. So it's a little bit hard, but this is why, folks, if you really need to, and you're in the Sydney region, and I'll go outside of the Sydney region, to help you out, within reason, to do what we call a one property transaction to assist you, so that you won't make that decision, bad decision that you're going to regret, and that your family is going to regret later on down the track. Again, because I see it over and over again, Martin, it's because we're fixing properties that people that didn't use our services have now called us to help them fix. And in one particular case, we're upwards of $245,000 already in termite damage that it's caused to the house, and they paid premium for the property at the auction. Obviously, they weren't guided by us. They didn't call us. This is after the fact. This is because they got a hold of us as a referral, because of the services that we provide in helping people and assist them with with renovating. And I've looked at the whole. I've looked at the building report that they got given. I've spoken with them. I looked at the condition of the house. I looked at how light that building report was, what the inspector admitted. But then you got to have the balls, and you got to have the courage to pursue it through the legal channels, and the appetite to do so. with no real assurance that you're going to get your money or that anything's going to be done. In that process, there's one individual in the Blacktown LGA that I know of that been going through that process. Again, somebody that didn't reach out and get our services, take up our services, and the poor bastard, he's been in legal wranglings for the last 3 years, and he's been living with his in-laws in a studio with 3 kids in the back of the in-laws' property. Because all the money's tied up in that transaction. This is what happens out there at grassroots levels that don't make the headlines, that don't make the mainstream media. This is the other side of the pain that people are going through.
And of course, I just always say, well, of course, buying a property is what's called a piece of punctiliar action. In other words, you make a decision and you do something, but there are following consequences from that decision, which can roll for not just a few months, but for years and years and years. And again, in my one-to-one conversations, I quite often have people who made decisions some years ago and they're now realizing the consequences of those decisions, and they're not necessarily positive. But just going back to the characteristics of real estate agents, I thought this article was quite interesting. This is from Sang Buckingham Jones, who talked about Ray White. Ray White wants to sell more homes off market. And, Ray White, they say, who sells about 15% of properties sold in Australia and New Zealand, has been trialling a new tech product to list upcoming homes for sale on its own website in several affluent Sydney suburbs for 5 days before they're listed on the portals. Edwin, what do you make of this? I thought the idea of a market was to be, open for all, but no. This is a whole different philosophy of selling property, which I worry about.
Look, I countered that argument with, and I sent one of the reporters. I sent them my article with regards to my thoughts on when selling agents beat their chest and say sold in a week, sold in a day, sold off market. In such a hot market that we're in. Look, needless to say, there are some properties, as I've shared on the show, that don't make it to the main portals, and for various reasons. One could be that the people in the infirmity or sickness, or that they're not healthy. The health is not good, so they can't move the individuals in order to have the open house. There's a lot of clutter. A lot of the properties that we have seen off market, where we've shared, are the properties that have the little brothers and little sisters in them, or the budget accommodation. Properties that are being geared up for budget accommodation, so you've got an overcrowding, and they don't want to sort of publish that on the mainstream. So they're sold off market but it's still through different portals, and it's often the case that a lot of these so-called off-market transactions, they're asking a premium anyway. So we really have to sift through that. But then there are some real genuine properties that we come across that are off-market. It's a desperate sale. They've overcommitted elsewhere, an urgency. So they're the ones that you could say, all right, they're off market. But in the majority, Martin, in 98% of the properties, the majority, they need to have that full exposure in order to achieve the best outcome, and then you go broader. So as a property consultant, in helping people that are looking at selling the properties, which is another service that we provide. So as property consultants, and to help them navigate and to help them appoint the right selling agent, to help them appoint the right marketing campaign with that selling agent in order to maximize the sale of the property. That is what we look at. We look at exposure far and wide, locally, interstate, internationally, through different media. But more importantly, Martin, we also choose the agent that's going to put skin in the game. Because if your selling agent does not have skin in the game in getting the best result for your property, is not really working for you. He's working that they are working for themselves. So we make sure that the selling agents that are acting for our clients have skin in the game. So the premise of the so-called off-market experience and off-market listings that Ray White are talking about, I'll tell you what it is. It's really their way of getting vendors to say, listen, we're going to try and sell your property off-market, and that way you don't have to spend the $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 that you would otherwise spend by in vendor paid advertising to hang your property on domain and real estate, because that's passed on to them. And potentially we're going to get you the price. So it is this two-pronged effect. One is to secure the listing so that they can get the listing, so that they can put the property on this mysterious website that it's supposed to expose the property for the rest of the world. But yet the fact that it's an exclusive real estate 201, that tells you what's really happening. Number one. And number two, it's really another way to speed up transactions within the network, because guess what? Selling agents in the majority of that network have become lazy. And that's what I put to it. It's just a lazy attitude. You're not going to achieve the most for your client. And that was the article that I put or my counter to that on LinkedIn to that. And there was a bit of discussion there, and obviously, as I said to our followers and our friends on Monday Evening Property Rant, so I'm not going to sit back. I'm a little bit more measured, but I'm not going to sit back, and I'm going to keep on putting it the way how it is. So this is again shows you the unfortunate, the dark side of the industry. So in my opinion, Martin, you shouldn't rejoice and you shouldn't clap your selling agent. You shouldn't you shouldn't give them a trophy for selling your property off market when you've got a horde of potential buyers. The demand is so great. If anything, it should send alarm bells, and it should be a red flag.
And I think one other observation, this to me speaks to this contention between the online world as controlled by the big property portals like real estate and domain, and the emerging portals that are trying to be built by some of these big real estate agency chains. And clearly there's a bit of a battle going on for dominance as well, because of course the property portals have actually got the industry by the throat at the moment. And there are people saying, no, there's got to be a different way. But the net result of all this is that people could actually end up with a campaign that is less effective than it might otherwise be. And in the meantime, there's a lot of money being passing between these various entities. Yep. And the bottom line is, folks, be really careful and cautious. When people come along and say, hey, I've got this wonderful super new approach to selling your property, you may not get the best value, you may not get the best service, you might not actually have the right outcomes. And again, to my mind, this just highlights the contention in the industry and a bit of desperation in some areas as to who is ultimately going to be dominant in the online space in 2 to 5 years' time. I think that's a really interesting and very open question at the moment.
But Martin, see, this is the whole thing. You're not going to take you're not going to mow their grass, right? You're not going to take the cake from domain and real estate unless you've got millions of dollars. I mean, many have tried, and many rest in peace, where they spend millions of dollars. I've been approached by two groups over the last 5 years, as a matter of fact, to help them and assist them with putting a third portal together. Because of my knowledge, because of what I have and my connections in the industry, and I said, look, unless you've got millions and millions of dollars to burn, it is not going to happen. The disruption has to be from within the industry. That's where the disruption has to come from, because we built domain and we built REA, and those bastards are now a dragon that are eating us alive. eating the saliva. But this is where vendors have to stay put. And as I said earlier on, and that is that vendors have to, and this is what we help our clients to do when we're interviewing agents that are looking at selling the properties that our clients call us to assist them with, and that we negotiate down on those fees, because at the end of the day, when you're talking an average of 1.5 plus GST, this is an average commission across Sydney. And you start talking about close to $2 million for the average home being sold. That's a lot of money. And then on top of that, the agents are asking the vendors for what we call the vendor paid advertising, which is your extra $10,000 plus an extra $7,000 for other sorts of marketing and sprucing up the place and this, that, and the other. And it's all plus. But again, we go back to an article that I posted, I think it was in 2013. It should be on LinkedIn. I'm going to revive that article. And I think back then I called it, is vendor paid advertising a dirty word, something along those lines. So I'm going to revamp, because guess what? Back then, properties that you could say that are worth 2 million. Let's say they were worth $1 million. So the commissions have increased, and so has vendor paid advertising. My argument when I sit down and interview real estate agents, as I said, what are you prepared to put in? Show me your contribution to the campaign, and obviously, they start talking about other things except vendor paid. Oh, you must pay the vendor, but that is something that we get charged. Hey, that is a fee for that agencies should be absorbing. But because domain and real estate they know that fee is passed on to the vendors, they don't give a rat's. 12 months ago, it was about 50% of what you're paying in many areas to list your property for the first 30 days. To give you that prominent position for the first 30 days. And that is that you can't even, years back, you could even opt out of that. You didn't have to pay for the premium listing. You could opt out of that. You could just put it up as a normal listing. But then all of a sudden it became that, no, every property had to be a premium listing. So then why? Why did that happen? Because the agents passed on that fee to the vendors, and vendors just kept on absorbing it. So, and this is why as I said, the unfortunate, that beast, that those two dragons are there, and they're eating as I say, that sooner than later, they're going to go a lot further. And my thoughts on that with regards to running their own show as a fully fledged office. So when you think that big organisations are going to eat their cheese, I don't think so. It's the other way around.
Follow the money, Edwin. Follow the money. And talking about following the money, I thought this was quite interesting. This is from James Kirby, and he's made an interesting commentary here on the property along the transport corridors, particularly the Metro Rail in Sydney. And he's written that rather than outperforming the market, house prices along the massive infrastructure project have failed to match growth in surrounding suburbs since its opened last year. And so, in fact, some suburbs along the Metro line have experienced declines in prices, including high-profile spots such as Chatswood and Cherrybrook. And there's a bit of an argument here. Well, is that anomalous, or are there others where there are similar things going on? And he makes the comment that, well, that's quite interesting. Investors betting on Melbourne's metro station development or infrastructure projects linked with the Brisbane Olympics will be watching the Sydney results closely. And it's interesting that Tim Lawless from Cotality says, no, it's a bit of an anomaly. There are others other stories and other things to say. But I thought that's quite interesting. Maybe you can't bank on the prospect of better transport actually lifting prices at the moment, which is something which many people say, oh, gosh, that's unusual.
Well, it's because of the high cost of construction in a way, and what happened. And look, people are finding out that developers aren't so flush with cash in order to go and buy these properties, and they inflated the prices of the land by exorbitantly, where they want to take the developer's profit away from the developer, and they're not going to build, so they're stuck. That's one of the one of the many contributing factors. The other one is, of course, is that guess what, Mark? Because of the lockdowns, because of everything else, because of the lack of social cohesion and disruption with uprisings in youth gangs and in different parts of Melbourne and Sydney and soon coming soon to your local commercial hub. Guess what? People aren't too keen to live close to the commercial hubs as much as they want to move away from them. And then you've also got working from home. So working from home means that you don't have to live as close to the commercial hubs as you once wanted to. Because you can now, technically live in Whoop Whoop and send your files online and whatever. So really, it's you've got to look at these previous reasons for why people wanted to live and why prices went up so high in those commercial hubs to look at now. People are finding out that, hey, having so many people concentrated in one commercial hub isn't necessarily going to make things safer or better or have better retail. You don't have to walk around the streets of Parramatta and many other commercial hubs where the light rail goes through, and you have to literally walk on the streets and look at the strip shops, and you see how many, and start counting how many are closed as to how many are open. And when you look at that, it's very gloomy, and it's not inviting. It's not inviting like they thought that they were going to become. And they end up becoming, over the medium term, they'll end up becoming ghettos, where it's going to be. That's where a lot of the so-called planning has gone haywire, has gone wrong because of the influx of people, the amount of people. You're going to get a lot of renters, you're going to get a lot of students, you're going to get a lot of the riffraff, you're going to get a lot of that, yes. But in terms of families that drive prices, no. So investors, as you and I know, they'll the best time to depreciate an apartment purchase is within the first 4 years. If you stretch it out to 7 years, is where you're going to get the most return. So after that, they become ghettos, and then you've got to be ever so fortunate to get a good property manager. So look, all these things play into that, into those roles. Like I said, people are looking for more for that comfort, and they'll pay more to be a bit further out on where they can breathe and they've got space, especially with the social unrest that is happening around commercial hubs interstate and soon to come to Sydney.
Absolutely. And in fact, on that, this was quite interesting. The developers here at Homebush, they want 50-story towers. The final developed portion, the undeveloped portion of Wentworth Point, is actually potentially up for two 50-story apartment towers after a decision by the state government's Housing Delivery Authority. And it's very interesting here. They're talking about some properties that will need to be 5% for essential workers, etc., etc. And the proposition is being opposed by many community members and leaders. And the key complaint about the development is growing pressure on the infrastructure in and around Sydney Olympic Park. And of course, that's part of what you've been talking about here. And the problem is, of course, is that it might look good on day one, but after 5 years or more, it's a very different story. And of course, the other angle on that is that the costs, as you mentioned, are also on the way up, and the construction cost means that it's very, very expensive. And of course, Andrew Bragg made this comment here: corrupt CMFU inflates new apartment costs by up to 30%, and then posed the question, what is Labor doing about it? The cost of construction of new apartments is actually a bit of a problem at the moment. It's still very expensive, and that's partly materials, but very importantly, it's the labor costs.
And it's not going to get any cheaper anytime soon, and because of what we've discussed over and over again, and that is the people that they believe that they're bringing in order to facilitate construction and to ease the pressure around construction. They don't want to work there. Yeah. Like I said before, a couple of months ago, how many engineers does it take to build a high-rise development? How many architects do you need to build a high-rise development? It's a wrong labour force that is coming. And then when you start going into high-rise development, you start talking unions, and then you start talking the difference between union members' wages to private members, privately employed subcontractors take-home packets is chalk and cheese, and this is. So as I put on X, on Twitter, as I put on there, it's not planned, it's orchestrated. They're all feeding each other, hence the cost. And somebody's got to pay for it, and at the end of the day, it's the consumer. But what they don't see, that's right before their eyes, as I've shared in the show. Because I look at the costs from our involvement on many different sides, and it's alarming how quickly they're moving upward to even. Hence the reason why developers don't really want to start, even when they get granted the upside. It's tricky for the banks to lend them the money. And now with the tighter regulations, where the banks are demanding genuine deposits, not those BS off the plan purchases that they used to be dished out before in years gone by. Now they want serious stuff, and they want real money in the bank, and no less than 10% deposits. No, none of these deposit bonds and any other form of shitcoin currency or whatever. They want hard cash in the bank as a deposit. So it's hard. It's going to get harder and tougher to build. So that's where we are, and it's not going to unravel. And there's going to be a lot more pressure on the market for purchases, and to navigate through a lot of the hurdles that they have to navigate. It's not a good place to be in, unfortunately.
No, absolutely. And in fact, this article brings that home quite nicely, because they did say there is some build times speeding up now. Townhouses are now being completed 5 weeks faster, with typical build times dropping to 14.8 months. And apartments, traditionally slower, have seen their build time come down to 32.9 months, while detached houses are seeing around an 11.5 month gap between approval and completion. But it's very interesting. Building a new detached house is now 35.8% slower than it was a decade ago. Delays on the higher density side are even worse. It can take 54.1% longer to build a new apartment, with a 27.6% deterioration in the speed of delivering townhouses. This is according to the Master Builders Australia latest analysis. And that is really very interesting with all the stuff we've been talking about, right? But build times are still very, very bad. It's taking a lot longer than a decade ago to get stuff done, and yet we still have more pressure and more demand for housing. So that's another reason why an expectation of a radical change in the industry is highly unlikely.
Yeah, and you've got to be careful with all those. Anything that they're saying that is going to be built a lot quicker than what it used to be built before, and you've got to look at the way that the deterioration of in some aspects from the NCC, where in the quality controls that are no longer there, and they want to dumb that down even more. When you've got your party walls with these townhouses, you don't have to walk through the complexes and look at what's between one townhouse and the next townhouse, or even a duplex for that for that matter is just a piece of gyprock that's 16 millimeters thick. You've got insulation on one side, insulation on the other side, and another layer of gyprock on the stud walls on either side. Could be anything from 10 to 13 millimeters. And there's your party wall. If one person farts in the lounge room, the next door neighbor will hear it and smell it at the same time. So it's this is what you've got. this is the craziness of it all, man. This is why you've got to be careful. People have got to be also careful as when they're buying what they're buying and how it's being built. Yeah, look, it's a move in the right direction, but the where I get icky about and where I get angry about is the quality of construction has gone down, but the cost at the end of the day, the asking price for the end product it continues to shoot up because of the desperation that people are in and that the governments put us in. But hey, look, at least it's a move in the right direction. But moves in the wrong direction is people are going to keep on flocking away from Victoria, and that's going to put a lot more pressure on New South Wales.
Yes, well, let's talk about our Get Out of Victoria section again. It's the continuing story. So this is that cats and dogs have become the latest target of the Victorian Allen government's tax hikes, with more than 1 million households to be hit with a doubling of registration fees. That's pretty remarkable.
That along with that comes obviously the new treaty that they're putting in place. You've got the social issues there with youth gangs, more taxes. Look, the question needs to be asked, Martin, what's the next tax going to be? Is it going to be a tax on your kids or tax on your grandparents? Why does the Victorian government want to chase people out, away from Victoria? They're calling for more development, but yet nobody wants to build, because from an investor's point of view and from you could say, shit, I'll move down to Victoria because I'll move down to Melbourne because it's cheaper to buy there, a lot cheaper to buy there now than it is in Sydney. But you can't even make take those steps anymore because of the draconian steps that they're taking in order to castigate people with more and more taxes. So it's just getting crazier. It's just getting crazier by the week. This is why I say that a lot of those punters that again, because back on bloody Facebook, get inundated with people spruiking. Victoria's the place to go and invest now because I think that the problem is I'm still navigating my way around it because I want to reply to these numbskulls and say, listen, it's still got a fair way to drop because of government policies. Because unless you can really see a change in government down there, those more and more people are wanting to get out, and even the people that vote for them are wanting to get out because a lot of the people that vote for them, I'm sure they've got pets.
Absolutely right. Let's look at the numbers, Edwin. So in Sydney, this is based on the domain definition of the Sydney region. On the 20th of October, there were 23,453 properties listed for sale. And 27th, they were 23,714. So a little bit of a rise. And you can see here that the chart is still trending higher than last year, which is quite interesting, or indeed 2023. So there's a little bit more on. If you look at the Melbourne story, 27,767 properties on the 20th, 28,077 on the 27th. So again, a slight rise. And in Brisbane, 3,416 on the 20th, 3,383 properties for sale in Brisbane. So in fact, Brisbane is going in reverse, whereas the other two, we're seeing a small number of rising listings. But again, I want to highlight, Edwin, quality of the listings is important. And actually, with a few exceptions, quality of new listings isn't looking that flash.
No, you're spot on. But we are getting a lot of in the top end markets, right, where we're getting a lot of tied properties. We were only discussing this. We were looking for a client over in the in the north, upper northern part of Sydney, and we're talking as to the demographics and the demographic changes and who's putting the properties on the market and how big these homes are. And not only the monstrous homes, but for the same token, it's going to take a lot more money to bring them up to speed. Not only that, but the terrain and the congestion that we now see in many parts of Sydney, when a lot of the trades want to get the vehicles in and out and find long-term parking, to perform the task that they've been contracted to do, and they're charging extra because guess what? You have they're copying parking infringements left, right, and centre, and it's the owners that have to pay for it. And that's if you can get, in certain cases, if you can get trucks, the delivery trucks have to be smaller, and because they're smaller, it takes a lot longer to get things delivered. All sorts of issues. Why? Because a lot of these areas, also like into the mountains, to the mountain region, where and also the Shire, where homes are now demanding a lot of work. So they're good homes. They may have strong bones, but at the end of the day, the kitchens need an uplift. The bathrooms need an uplift, and but all these add-ons are just are making people think that they've got to think very, very carefully before they move forward. So it's not only lemons that you've got to worry about; it's also the cost of something that you might consider to be have solid bones. If you can't get these, trades will charge, and they'll charge you a hell of a lot more. That can, in some instances, can even double in price because of the fines that you have to cover them for, and you can't avoid it. You really can't avoid a lot of it.
Yep. Well, some charging like wounding bulls around, I think. Let's look at the auction numbers. So, interestingly, you've highlighted here the number in Victoria, 1,621 on the 25th, compared with 684 in New South Wales. Now, is that just because of the fall of the different holidays, or is there something more going on here, Edwin?
Like I said last week with that, Martin, it was there's a lot more people wanting to get out. If you look at this week's numbers, there you've got the races on, and they've dropped down to 313. Sydney's picked up a little bit more, but when you compare Melbourne to Sydney across the last few months, it's just more and more people wanting to get out. They simply want to get out. It's becoming harder to keep property, and the auction campaign, the shorter campaigns, suit a lot of people that just want they want to take a hit. You look at the numbers, the listings on market in general terms, they're still growing. We're gonna crack the 30,000 listings on market in Melbourne very soon. In terms of auctions, you've got they're still waning from 2024 numbers to this year's numbers. The numbers are still waning. It seems to be catching up a little bit. It's a little bit of excitement. The question is has spring come in a little bit later for vendors? Or is that the news of the? Is it that the news of the boost in prices because of the 5% gift grant, whatever you want to call it, from the government, that sort of spurred on more people to put the properties on in terms of on market by way of the auction campaign. I think in a couple of weeks we'll get a better idea. But overall, because we've hit new highs, and because people don't really have anywhere else to go, the numbers aren't as strong. On market numbers aren't as strong. Your regular sales. You've got a lot of investor stock on market, but don't forget that what's also masking the numbers from last year, the overall numbers from last year to this year, is also the amount of land envelopes or house and land packages that are being sold in the fringes as well. So that's 1,500, 1,700 more than last year. So in essence, we're really tracking on par. But the confidence levels of people achieving the prices at auction aren't as high as what they were last year.
Absolutely. Well, let's just look at the rentals. And on the way into that, I just want to highlight this show. I made a show the other day called The Migration Con Gets Another Leg Up. And here I highlighted the fact that some of the changes below the waterline have been made to bring more students and other people into the country again. And there's a big debate about whether migration, of course, is rising or whether it's not. The point I wanted to make, though, Edwin, is that when people come into the country, they will tend to look specifically in the rental sector first, because, of course, it takes a bit of time to find your feet. And even if you want to buy somewhere, you've got to sort of, go through that process. So the first impact of the high migration is seen in the rental sector. That's one of the reasons why the renting problems are rising, why the supply of rental property is very, very low at the moment, and the fact that the rentals are still rising very fast. And that's one of the levers that's going through the CPI numbers. So when you actually look at the impact of that, it's quite interesting. Let's look at the Sydney rentals first. So on the 13th, there were 10,042. On the 27th, 9,885. So we've seen a drop in the number of properties for rent, quite a significant drop actually in the Sydney region. And in Melbourne, on the 13th, there were 11,767. On the 27th, there were 11,656. So that tells you something about where people are preferring to want to come, right? There's less of a fall in the greater Melbourne area than the Sydney region. So is this, again, another symptom of the don't want to go to Melbourne?
Yeah, and it's also, like you said, Martin, it's a sign of the simple fact that the average across Melbourne and Sydney has been around between 10 and 11,000 rentals available throughout the whole year. That tells you that is they're very, very low numbers, and you can see by what you said earlier on, you can see how that those numbers are getting smaller. And considering the fact that there's been a lot of completions in high-rise developments around Sydney of late, but yet those numbers are still relatively low. So the absorption of new rentals coming on market is are very, very high, and so because what we should be seeing right now is we should be getting closer to your 12,000.
Yeah.
But we're not, and then people aren't obviously are absorbing that pain by accepting the 10% rental increases. So it's really painful out there. What a lot of people don't see, and what you and I talk about, what you and I have firsthand, information from the conversations that you have and from the conversations that we have and we see on the ground, is vastly different to the way it's being reported, or miles apart from the way it's been reported in the mainstream. It's sad. It's sad. It's painful. It also makes one angry from time to time because of the way that the state of affairs. But that dropping below 10,000 in Sydney, considering the amount of new finished apartment blocks around Sydney as we drive around, it's just crazy numbers.
It comes back to more and more demand, more and more migration, and of course the government is trying to fudge the figures and say no, migration is not that high, when of course everyone is saying no, it is. And in fact, we will see the later numbers coming through. Now, finally, as we come to the end of the show, your tip for the week. This is a really important one. And this is about the long game in scamming. And this is something which I think people need to be really, really aware of. Of course, there's a lot of online scams at the moment, lots of other types of scams, a lot of scams related to crypto. But this is a really interesting insight.
It was a presenter from Macquarie Bank. One of my friends, one of my colleagues from the industry invited me, myself and Dusty, our team, over to the Econ Capital seminar in by the casino there, and we had a great time. And just listening to all the scamming that goes on, and he was bringing it all into perspective, and the different levels. So this is at the top level of scamming, and it was rather interesting.
The first scammers, if they've got a list of clients who have been scammed, who are potentially vulnerable, who potentially may not be at full capacity because these types of people do get scammed more than others, there's a pretty good chance that they might get scammed again. Some people, people that act fraudulently, could consider that valuable, that information. So what do? They sell it. They sell a list of clients that have already been scammed to other scammers, and they will try again. So in this instance, there was a client of Macquarie's that had fell victim to a crypto scam, so similar to the one that we just went through. It wasn't until a few years later that they received a call from someone who had advised them that they had located their blockchain, or I'm not sure exact terminology of it, the cryptocurrency, I believe it would be, over the blockchain, and they were able to recover their funds at a cost. It would cost because they would actually be providing a service, and that client once again provided hundreds and hundreds of dollars to that fraudulent to that scammer.
The scammers are very patient, and if the first lot of scammers didn't scam you, or they may have got your details, or part of your details, then they'll sell that information to a second lot of scammers, and that information becomes valuable. And it could be 6 months, a year, or whatever later on that they'll try and scam. So in many cases that the Macquarie Bank in the files and what he was sharing, explains it a lot better in the video that our viewers and followers can watch and listen to. It is rather interesting, but obviously there's a lot lower level scam that's going on, and the reason why, apart from money and everything else that they were talking about at the seminar that we were invited to, I thought this segment was very, very interesting. Earlier on, he said that it's almost like we're into a new cycle of scamming, and the what was the terminology that he used? The sophistication of it, in the brute force of that they're using through AI, to break your pins and your pin numbers and your security codes and numbers online, on your laptops, on your PCs, whatever. Very difficult for it to be on smartphones. And he basically said that unless you're running a pin, or it's more than 9 characters. Because of the brute force that they're using now with AI, you become, obviously, the less that you use, the more vulnerable you become. If you've only got a PIN of 4 to 6 characters, the brute force that they're using with AI now, they can break that within minutes. If they really want, if they've got other of your details. And it goes on. But when you start talking 9 digits or 9 different combination of 9 different characters onwards, even if they use the brute force, as you call it, through AI to crack your pins, it would take them hundreds of years. Obviously, to break. So basically, look, Martin, I've got a hard time remembering 5 digits. Like my laptop from 3 years ago, my PIN on my laptop, right, was 5-digit long. So that's as long as it was been, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Very good. And interestingly,
I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm serious,
Well, oh dear, Edwin, you must do better. And interesting, Michelle Bullock was speaking last week, and she was talking about the scary technology and scams that threaten the payment system. And she was talking specifically about quantum computing. And if in that quantum computing, emerges as expected, then effectively all of the protections that we currently have in standard encryption is likely to just disappear. It's going to be broken quite quickly. And so she regarded the whole issue and attacks on confidential data as a big threat to banks and private companies. And even, her own family had been involved in managing a spoof scam. Such attacks could become more common. And the interesting observation here, Edwin, is that the tech is getting more and more sophisticated, but there's more and more play, not just on the tech itself, but on what I call human interaction. In other words, playing people, teasing people, getting information and coming back and tapping them on the shoulder later. And so I think people need to be just very, very cautious. And if they get contacts that they've not seen before, with links that they've not seen before, just be cautious and careful, because of course, once the information is out there in the dark web and stuff, and of course, people like Qantas and other people, they've all got issues that they've created, which means that bits of information about individuals can be all over the place. And then with the AI that we've got, we can put it together for nefarious purposes. So it is important to be cautious and careful. And sometimes face-to-face interaction is actually the most secure interaction. Just worth saying, Edwin.
Yeah, 100%. So if anybody wants to interact with me, long black with a bit of honey is the invite, and we can interact face to face any coffee shop in Sydney.
Absolutely, Edwin. Lovely to talk with you again. Thank you. Some really important points as always today. I look forward to doing it again next week. Have a wonderful week. Meantime,
take care of yourself, man. All the best.
Cheers.